Catherine here. I'm going to talk about glues, adhesives, tape, as well as a couple different tools that might help you on collages and mixed media. If you've got paint swatches that you made and you want to incorporate them in your collage, or if you make your collage and if it starts to curl at the end, such as this, what you can do is spray the backside with some water. I might do this one for the demo. Or sponge it gently. You just want to make sure that it's misted all the way across and evenly, which is sometimes hard to do, or sometimes you can also take a damp sponge and blot, do not rub on the back of your paper. And then if you have something like newsprint, wax paper might not dry, but not newspaper with ink. This is like a cheap paper called newsprint. Or you can use 2 blank sheets of paper, sandwich it in there, and then put it under weight, such as books, blocks, something, but you just want to make sure that whatever you put on top of it is larger than the piece of paper itself. So I've gone ahead and chosen blocks or books that were larger than the sheet of paper I needed to flatten. When arranging or planning for design, if you don't have something like pre-laid out, they make a couple different types of adhesive out there. There's actually a couple, like in Mod Podge or a couple other brands that will specifically say repositional glue or tape. This one is like a spray adhesive and it's repositionable for stencils. So this usually will actually stick if it's really thin materials, I'll say, but if you have like a thicker material, it's not a permanent. So you can look for permanent or not permanent or repositionable glue or tape even. So when I work, sometimes I'll use double-sided tape as a way to have things stick a little bit before finding a permanent home for it. You can also, if you have like a lot of sewing pins, kind of like in the Elliot Hunley video with his little operas, he pins all of his collage pieces and sometimes doesn't even use glue at all. So I use a little bit of this. Sometimes I will even pre-stick it like on clothes just to like reduce the tack even further. So if you have something like a masking tape, which is sometimes a little bit stronger than like a painter's tape or a washi tape, you might like just blot it on some fabric really quickly before you use it. So that's what I usually do. I might stick something on the back as I kind of rearrange where I want things in my drawing to go or be. Place things. So I can play with the sense of space, I can play with scale, I can play with hiding. This is not my print, this is a leftover, but I like the orange, so I saved it. Something else is as you go, you don't always have to like get rid of everything that you've cut out. I cut around this figure and I have some interesting patterns on the back side. And so don't forget positive and negative shape when you're working. One that's really cool is this was from the little hummingbirds that I cut out, which, you know, a lot of pieces, because of color, it'll look very different depending on where it's located. So like on the orange, you barely notice the hummingbird. It's closer to orange, whereas if you set it on just about any of these other areas, it stands out. There's more contrast there. So like here, there's a lot going on, but something that's kind of nice is this negative space that was created with the hummingbird. And so this could also be used in here as well. So think about layering, overlapping. You can even build things on top, block things out. Sometimes I like to weave things. I think it's a lot easier to work with things where you do cut things out and there's little holes and windows. So Maybe it looks a lot more mysterious if she's partially covered. I'm a fan of covering things with plants and hiding things in plants. So something like, so see what works. You might experiment. You might change your mind as you work with the materials you have. Something that you might think about is creating unity in your piece. So maybe that can be from color, using a color scheme or a specific color palette, or a range or a key, like high key, like all pastels, and you can have it all the same and maybe have a focal point. You can think about like direction of materials. Like say maybe I have a lot of just the color swatches. What if I arrange them all in a single like direction, or what if I arrange them in a grid? So there's a lot of things you can do with materials to explore different compositional to make your piece stronger. If you happen to have like tracing paper, which I think was an optional supply, you can think about transparency. So if you have tissue paper, you can glue things like that down. And so laying things and gluing them down in such a way where you can kind of just see through areas. I had a book on Art Deco furniture, and I just like traced a lot of, I think I checked it out from the library, and I just like traced parts of a pavilion of like a 1930 something World Fair. And so like I like the typeface, and I traced that. So I usually, because I love drawing too, I often like incorporate, I scan or I photograph, scan, print out my own drawings at different scales. This is like a print of mine of like a photo of my grandma. So I draw, I paint, I do prints, I use photographic material, and I use lots of materials in my own work. My cat. So you can make it personal, or if you're doing something like the news article, it doesn't have to be, but think about how your materials in themselves can tell a story or add to the concept of your piece. Like maybe you have something about obscuring something, and you can literally use the way you layer pieces together to, you know, maybe hide something if a hidden message is important to the story that you're trying to tell. Or doing things like cutting out windows, or manipulating your materials. So the way you do that can also help reinforce what you want to communicate. So think about what you have available to you. You might not have all the supplies in the world, but you can be really resourceful with just a few things that you have on hand, or things that you might normally recycle. Like grab some of these things and use your paint, use your drawing materials on top of things like this. So once I lay things out, I might even go back over parts of this with paint and use paint to either add more or to block out areas, or create color patches to create emphasis, or to knock things back, or I can cover and mask things again. Or you can take something like this, like a stencil that you've used, and repeat it in a pattern, or have it accumulate in a corner and spread out if there's anything, you know, if you'd like to create a pattern within your piece to create a sense of movement or change or shifts. So anyway, have fun with materials, manipulate them, hold them, rearrange them, and your initial idea might shift from your original compositions if you are working in this way. So, and that's okay. So don't worry about that.